Lynn Carruthers and Kate Clark, and they're the authors of this wonderfully helpful and practical book called Slow Down When Someone Dies. Lynn is a trustee of Pushing Up the Daisies, a charity formed in 2016 by Kate, and their work is aimed at anyone in Scotland, particularly, who wants and needs practical options and legal rights immediately after someone dies, and especially for those wanting to keep someone's body at home after they've died. I mean, gosh, the two of you, what an incredible piece of work. I can't imagine how long it took you to write. All the legal stuff's in here, anything that anybody could possibly want information about when somebody's dying or is dying. And it's certainly not just for people in Scotland. I mean, this really needs to be global. So, Lynn, I'm going to come to you first, just to ask you, what inspired you both to do this?
It was a long burn. Kate and I met about 15 years ago when I moved to the north of Scotland, but just very briefly, we both happened to go to a similar meeting and kept just bumping into each other, and we always ended up talking about death because of Kate's background.
Subject, isn't it?
Of course.
On it, you can't get off it.
Because of Kate's background as a Marie Curie nurse, but I'd been looking for a long time for what could make my experience after somebody died better, because funerals didn't do it for me. I mean, curious enough, in the middle of this, we discovered that we'd both been engineers in our previous jobs, which is a pretty rare thing for people of our generation, for two women to both be engineers. And so we just had conversations, and then my mother died, and I began thinking a bit more about it. And then Kate was already holding round the kitchen table sessions where people, someone would invite their friends, and she would speak with them about what you could practically do after somebody died to look after them, to keep them at home if you wanted to. And that had been really helpful to me. I wasn't able to look after my mother at home, but nonetheless, it was tremendously helpful. But I then began to realize that my son and daughter had no experience of somebody dying. And I began to try to write to them about preparing for that in some way. And so it evolved from there. It became conversations. I took the letters that I attempted to write to around the kitchen table session, and it was very well received. So I kind of kept going. And then we continued to talk also about where the charity was going, because I'd begun to be involved with the charity by then. And we're meeting up for coffee, sort of thing. And then, now what happened next? We were invited, Kate was invited to give a talk to a group of soul midwives, the Scottish soul midwives. And after she'd spoken to them for half an hour, they said, would you write us a course?
Wow.
Oh, and so I'd been tagging along on this meeting, and we said, yes, fine.
We'll do
it. in January. And this was in October, November time. And then we looked at each other and it was like, oh my goodness, we've agreed to do a course. But we pulled it together, and we did it online. I can't. This was all at the beginning of COVID and everything as well. But also the soul midwives were spread all over Scotland, so we couldn't practically bring them together. So we did it online, and initially we did it very live. We just did it ourselves, speaking and so on. But over time, we realized that was going to drive both of us mad if we had to keep doing it. So we wanted to record it. And at that point, COVID happened. And so we worked through COVID, but just doing it entirely online.
Can I just bring Kate in here as well? Because obviously I'm so interested what she's got to say about how the book progressed from here. So you had the idea, and also about you decided to set up Pushing Up the Daisies. So can you talk us through Pushing Up the Daisies, and then how you and Lynn ended up creating this wonderful book?
I think the seed of the book, Sue, was an experience I had with my auntie when she died. And that was the seed of Pushing Up the Daisies and the book. And that experience, things that happened in the days after she died were very important to me and became more so. And I feel very fortunate that all my family, when they have died, stayed at home. They stayed in their beds until they left home on the day of their funeral. And so then I became a nurse, really through another family experience, which made me want to help people die at home. So when I started doing community nursing, Marie Curie nursing, I realized what was happening for the rest of the population, that they were rushing into getting a funeral director and just seeing the consequences of that. Yes. So that was really the seed of I one day decided that I wanted to stand up and say, I think it matters. I think it matters a lot what happens when someone dies. And for the living and for the person who has died.
It's really,
so that was a seed, I think.
Yeah, I think there is a change going on. I think the death cafes have really helped. People actually coming together to talk about death and dying, where before it wasn't real. I mean, good old John Underwood starting those off in 2011, and I think we've all benefited from that. And I do feel like there is a sense of change in England. I don't know if it's the same in Scotland, but we have the hospices at home, and in fact, the ratio of people dying in hospital, which was around about over 50% not so long ago, has now dropped to around about 47, which I think is great.
Right.
So Lynn, tell me, so you sat down, you did the course, you sat down, you wrote the book, and just tell me about the processes that you went through, why you decided to put in what you did.
It was, I suppose, a very iterative process in that we were presenting the course, and inevitably you got questions. People asked questions, and so we then went away and found the answers and included them in the next presentation of the course. It has to be said, Kate has the most incredible knowledge of this whole field because she's been so engrossed in it for such a long time. And so a lot of it has come directly from Kate, who's then, checked out, as you say, the legalities and so on. But yes, it was iterative. And I have to confess, there was an element of naivety in it, in that we had the course and we had it all written out. And I said, why don't we make this into a book? And I had this sort of idea, it wouldn't take very long.
No, I think when you sit down to write a book, you never do. You think, oh, I'll get that done in a month. Oh.
Exactly.
A year later, was it 2 years?
Well, it was about 2.5, but that included just about such a we have already had the foundation of what we wanted to offer.
Yes.
But that people wanted answered as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm very curious about the fact that it almost like the universe brought you both together. And I want to come to Kate about this because it is strange that both of you were engineers. That's weird. And that both of you met. I mean, why did you choose to become an engineer initially, Kate?
I chose because I got caught up in when I was about 16 doing my O-levels. That's when there was a push here to get women into engineering. So it was a sort of trailblazing, thing to do, really. So I got caught up in that, because I had to quickly take science subjects and get onto an engineering degree.
And I guess it didn't call you. Something else was calling you.
Well, it did. I mean, the project management side of it I loved, and that really appealed to my intellect. But yeah, in my 30s, I realized that was something else I wanted to be doing, and that's when I trained to become a nurse.
And what would you say that working with death and dying has taught you, Kate?
Wow. Well, it's taught me so much. But it's taught me that that life is finite, and it's really affirmed my life. There's nothing for me that is more life affirming than being with someone who has died. and being alongside, seeing someone that's not breathing, you know, that there's nothing makes me feel more alive than that. So I have the great privilege as a nurse to be close with people who I'm not so emotionally close with. So it's a different, you know, it can be a different experience when it's your own, you know, dearly loved one that has died. But or you know, but yeah, but it's an incredible, it's an
It
incredible
is.
life affirming
It's
experience.
an incredible experience, and to sit beside someone who, I call it like witnessing the closing of the chapter of their life. This is the last chapter of their life. Their book is closed and it's done. And it, for me, I was sitting beside my friend who was in November when she's very, very good friend. And I wasn't there actually at the moment, but I was there very, very close to her dying process. And I was so curious about where she was. And sometimes she was lucid, sometimes she wasn't. And it really felt like the veil was thinning. It's got this sense of something you can't even put into words. And I wondered, Lynn, if you've experienced that as well.
I've never been with someone who's died. I've been with them afterwards, but the closest was, I think, my mother. It was about half an hour afterwards when we got back to the hospital. So I've never had that experience. I just know it's really important. I know it's one of those things that I know without needing to do it. I don't quite understand what that is, but it's a very deep one.
Yes, I think, you know, just being very close to somebody who's died, you know, after they've died, there's still something in the air. Kate, sorry, I cut in on you.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say there's a special, how you want to say, energy, natural force, or supporting the situation if we can get into the flow of it. And that in itself is very nurturing and nourishing. And I gave a talk recently too. It was somebody who was a birth doula. I was in the audience, and she was saying, what you're saying sounds so similar to when I'm present. When I can become present at a birth, everything flows. Really, all that, you know, what I have to do is to be present. And I think it's the same experience. Certainly for people that we have that I've supported after someone has died, and this is what we're trying to do with the book, is get people into this place where once, if you can sort of hold the fear and become present and follow your instincts. We have instincts, we know what to do. It's accessing them that's difficult when we don't have the experience in our culture.
And I think it's what you're saying, it's the fear that stops us. It's what we've not been trained, we don't know, we haven't got mum or you know, the female lineage passing down the information. We're like, what do we do now? And the instinct is ring the undertaker. So Lynn, what would you say about that to anyone who's sitting with somebody who's died, or you're just it's in that moment? What would you say? What have you written about that in the book?
I mean, if I was physically present, I would encourage them to slow down. But the difficulty is that because, as you say, we have no culture of it, people, when someone dies, it can be a shock, even when it's expected. And it affects our brains, it affects our abilities to access our higher functions and so on. So people default to calling a doctor, calling the funeral director. And that's why we've written the book, in the hope that people can read this ahead of time and they're much more ready for it. I mean, I've tried to find analogies for people who are just not interested in death. And one of them is that, you know, learning first aid. We none of us want someone to have an accident or a heart attack in front of us. But if you've learned first aid, you're much better equipped to deal with it when it does happen and be able to help them and possibly yourself at the same time. I mean, the other analogy,
that is about helping yourself, actually, isn't it? I mean, let's face it.
Exactly. And sometimes it's saying, you know, check what the situation is and don't go into it if it's not safe, for instance.
Yes.
I mean, the other analogy that I have used, my former husband is a glider pilot, and that's how I met him. I was learning to fly. And when you're learning to fly, the first thing you do before you take off is you think about what might happen if the engine cut out or the cable broke, if it's a glider, at a certain height or not at a higher height. You look at the wind, you look at where you are, the landing areas, and you check out what you would do if it happened. You don't want it to happen, obviously, but if it did, you're ready for it. And so you can act immediately instead of kind of going, oh my God, something terrible's gone wrong. What am I going to do? So
it's
go on.
So I think it's interesting because a lot of people are who've never been taught about death, they've never been present, or they haven't even seen perhaps somebody particularly ill. And there's a sort of this fear is built up in their imagination about what it's going to look like. But in my experience, sitting next door to the dying, even when they're distressed, and there are a lot of deaths like that, but they're right at the end, there's this, and I'm sure, Kate, you'll have more to say about this. There's this sense of it's done, and there is a release. And it's such a cliche to say, oh, they're at peace now. But I feel it does for me feel like that. And I wondered what you think, Kate.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree, Sue. And that feeling of peace, I think, can be a lot easier to contact in the days after someone has died. I think that's the sort of sense that carries on, if you stay present and stay connected to it.
Yes.
Because there's not the anxiety, there's not the distress, there's no waiting for the last breath, which can be quite a tense experience.
The chain-stoked breathing is not a nice experience, particularly to go through.
No, I know. I'm remembering someone I supported, and her daughter just came home from Australia the day before she died, and then when she died, she stayed at home, and her daughter kept her body cool and looked after her, brushed her hair every day. And afterwards, she told me that was a lot more supportive and helpful for her to come to terms with it than the first day, the day she'd found really stressful when her mum was actually taking her last breath.
Yes,
because she'd never seen anything like that before, and
well,
so it's a wind down time as well.
Yes, there is, and just for people that have never heard of chain-stoked breathing, it's Kate, do you want to explain it so that people can understand what it is?
Well, before someone takes their final last breath, their breathing can change in all sorts of ways. And so it can be quite alarming. It can get fast, it can get slow, and then there can be long pauses between one breath and the other. That's chain-stoked breathing.
Yes.
And so it might seem like someone has stopped breathing, then they will take another breath.
And you're going, have they? Oh, no, they haven't. Have they died this time? Oh, no. So it can be quite a stressful, tense time and that's part of the dying process, obviously, but it isn't something to be frightened about. It's quite normal.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what would you say to someone who wants to keep, Lynn, I'm going to come back to you for this, who wants to keep the body at home after they've died? Because as I said, the natural reaction is ring the undertaker. That's what we need to do. That's the law. So in your book is absolutely not saying that. So can you just explain to someone who does want to do that and doesn't know how to do it, what would you say to them?
Well, I would certainly say think ahead if you possibly can. If you've got time to prepare for this, take the time and consider what might be right for you. A friend of mine actually did this. Her mother died in a care home, and my friend had bought a copy of the book, and she was reading the book as her mother was dying. And she finished the book that afternoon, and her mother died that evening. It was quite extraordinary. But she said it was really helpful because she was able to talk through with her husband what they might do, whether to bring her mother home from the care home or not. Her mother had lived in the care home for over 10 years, so she didn't have another home to come back to. And so they explored. He was uncomfortable about this. She thought about bringing him home to, they had a kind of office in the garden they could have used. But in the end, she thought, actually, that doesn't feel right to me. And she spent the night with her mother in the care home. And then she called the undertaker and had him take her away. And she was buried a little while later. So I think if at all possible, think ahead and read through what your possibilities are and have those conversations with yourself and other people about what might be right for you, because it might not be what you think. I mean, the idea of having someone at home, when it's happened, as for Kate, when it's happened at home, the person's died there, or like her auntie has come back from the care home because she's only been there a short while, that's perfect. But if that's not, if there's not somewhere to bring them back to, if you haven't got much space, that's a big factor. And also other people's attitudes. Just take
some
time.
people in the family might not want or like the idea of a dead body being in the house.
Absolutely.
And that's truth. Yeah.
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 But if you explore it ahead of time, when you're not in this heightened state that someone's died, and our brains do, we explain in detail what happens to your brains when someone dies. And it's like you lose your ability to access any of your higher functions. You very much default to whatever is your kind of basic way of being. And so, yeah, it's, if you can possibly do stuff ahead of time, think about it ahead of time.
And Kate, it's not a legal requirement, is it, to ring the undertaker straight away?
No, absolutely not. There's no legal requirement to contact an undertaker at any time. I mean, undertakers can be very helpful, especially if you haven't prepared and you haven't had any experience of death before. But there's no need to use an undertaker at all if that doesn't seem helpful or right.
A lot of people don't understand that it actually is not a legal requirement. It's convenient if you don't want to look after the body to have somebody else there taking that away from you. But I do feel that whole sense of, oh God, I've got to ring the undertaker. And this is what I love, the title of your book, which is Slow Down When Someone Dies. And as Lynn was saying, it can be kind of like panic time, help, I don't know what to do. So absolutely, it is about getting prepared and making those decisions. Is it okay for me to have them in the house? Is it okay for the kids sometimes, if it's granny, grandpa? And lots of people I've spoken to find it quite difficult to see a dead body, even if they're prepared to do that. And I wondered, Kate, if you'd had experiences of that.
Yeah, because we're not used to seeing bodies here in Britain. I mean, you think in Ireland, it's commonplace and it's perfect. That is the norm there.
Yes.
And I think the thing in Ireland as well is that about wakes and people visiting to see bodies, it becomes usual. So people have possibly seen quite a few bodies before someone close to them have died. So you're not seeing a very important person to you, being the first person that you've experienced being dead. But I would always say, make sure the close people, particularly carers, people who've been caring. I strongly want us to help people that have been caring. There's really not enough understanding of the need to release that relationship gently. But for everyone to have a sleep before you decide to do anything. Now, if someone has died at home, okay, that means having somebody's body there maybe for a few hours. You want to cool the room, keep it cool. But for people to have a sleep, have a rest, dissipate the energy a bit, and then decide, okay, what do we want to do now? And there's not much research, but research is that there are some people who instinctively do not want to see someone's body. They deal with grief in other ways. That's not a problem. But there are people who really have deep regrets if they do want to see someone's body and they don't do it. So I would always say that they take precedence. For me, there's no question. If there's one person within a group of close people that feels like they want a bit more time, please do everything you can to give them that. And because other people can go out, they can go to the shops, they can go to have a coffee. They do not need to be involved, but please support people who do. Because from the stories that people tell us, Sue, people don't ever recover.
It's incredibly important for friends as well, and they're often
absolutely.
And I always saying that friends probably know the person who's died better even than their family. And there is such a love and bond there, and often they're just actually on the outside and perhaps not encouraged to come in. So friends, I think, have to particularly look after carers and friends have to particularly
yeah.
look after themselves and find
Mhm.
their way through. Lynn,
And it's so Sue, can I
Oh,
just say as well, sorry, just one more important point about that
yes,
is
please.
that it is a day at a time. It's taking it a day at a time. So people worry about what's going to happen with somebody's body, all sorts of terrible, ideas about how it's going to decompose and become smell very bad. And so that's very unlikely in reality. But all you need to do is take it a day at a time. So at any point, in day 2, day 3, day 4, you can call a funeral director to come and help. It's not like it's not all or nothing. You can take it. And in my own experience, many times, and in my personal experience, if somebody has the ability, to just wait and not have someone ripped away from them, usually people are ready within 3 to 4 days to hand someone over. And that's my wish, that we all are ready to hand our people over. Whether it's handing them over to the grave, handing them over to the crematorium, or handing them over to a funeral director.
Yeah.
That is the key.
Yeah,
To have that feeling,
3 days.
everything is okay, and please take them now.
Yeah.
And for them, and for the dead person, this is another whole conversation.
Of
But I
course.
think that's helpful for them too.
Absolutely. I had a wonderful conversation with a funeral director who encourages people to stay at home. And he just said, make sure you have lots of frozen peas to tuck around them.
Well, that's it.
I thought
Empty
that
your
was
freezer if necessary.
a wonderful, practical thing to say. I thought,
Yeah.
well, that's helpful. Lynn, I'm conscious of time, so we're coming to the end now. So is there something you'd like to conclude with, to say something that's pressing for you right now?
Slow down.
Yeah.
Slow down and be gentle. And I think, just to kind of complete what Kate was saying earlier about when someone dies, we speak at some length in the book about the quiet voices, and that can often include the carers, who are people who either don't quite know quite as quickly what they want, or aren't in some way able to express it, or do express it, and everybody else says, no, you want to do something else. And it's like, we really want to advocate for the quiet voices so that they get their needs met, because they may not know quite yet what their needs are, and they'll need time. So again, slow down. Give yourself and other people time. Take your time and be gentle.
This is the book to read to help you slow down when somebody is dying, and also how to take care of them and what you need to know about, so that you can do their end of life and their aftercare really well for yourself and for them and for the family and friends. So thank you, Lynn, and thank you, Kate, so much for this conversation. I know it's going to help a lot of people to understand and feel more comfortable around it.